We'll do a review on Likutei Sichos in Chelek Chav Beis in volume 22. This is the second Sicha for the Parshas Emor. It's a very interesting Sicha, discusses a lot of different details about the Sukkos and about, which is in the Parshas Emor, and about the mitzvah of benching lulav in the sukkah, the connection between sukkahs with the Yom Tov sukkahs, the connection between contrast, the connection between Pesach and the Chag Hamatzis, and the Rebbe is also will explain that by Pesach, the unique time of Pesach is because that corresponds to the time that we exited of Egypt. So the celebration, the Yom Tov, has to do with the time frame. And in that time frame, there is a mitzvah to eat matzah, but Sukkot, it's the other way around. The Torah made a mitzvah of Sukkot, and when we do the Sukkah, that's when we made a Yom Tov around this, as the Rebbe brings out the different interesting nuances and the pasuk, how it's set up a little bit different by Pesach and Shavuos and Sukkot. Pesach and Sukkot both have other names to them, and to see the differences, as the Rebbe will explain in the Sikha, but we will go step by step. So we'll start in the beginning in Aleph. From Posik, Koriv L'Soif Parshas Hamayadis, on the verse which is towards the end, in which the whole section of Emor discusses the various all the Yomim Tovim over there. So towards the end of the portion of the Yomim Tovim, so first it talks about Pesach and Shavuos, the Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And now we're talking about Sukkot. So over there, the pasuk says, "Daber b'nei Yisrael leimer," speak to the b'nei Yisrael, saying, "B'chamisha osor yom lachodesh hashvi'i hazeh," on the 15th day of the 7th month, which is the month of Tishrei, Chag HaSukkos Shivas Yomim LaHashem. So there shall be a festival of Sukkot 7 days to Hashem. So on this pasuk, there's an interesting Toras Kahanim, which is a little bit difficult to understand what he means. The Rebbe will explain. Steht in Toras Kahanim, so it says in Toras Kahanim, what is this coming to teach us? As the Rebbe will explain, that the Mefarshim explain that why does the pasuk say B'chamisha osor yom lachodesh hashvi'i hazeh chag HaSukkos? It should have just said B'chamisha osor yom lachodesh hashvi'i hazeh chag shivas yomim laHashem, because the idea of Sukkot will be mentioned in the pasuk a little bit later on. So the Toras Kohanim says, "Ma Talmud loymar?" Why does it tell you here Chag HaSukkos? So he answers like this: Lefi shenemar basukos teishvu shivas yomim. Later on in the pasuk it says, "You shall say, sit in the sukkah for 7 days." So if the pasuk would have just said, "B'chamisha osor yom lachodesh hashvi'i hazeh shivas yomim chag shivas yomim laHashem," I wouldn't say that it's Chag HaSukkos. It would have just said Chag shivas yomim laHashem. And then it says, Basukkos you should sit 7 days. We might think that it means that once you finish the 6th day, the 7 days of the Chag, then you start to sit in the Sukkos. And that's why, because Shenemar Basukkos Teishu Shivas Yomim says later on, sit in the Sukkos Shivas Yomim. I'm not sure. I don't know. Does it mean the same 7 days that we said B'chamisha osor yom lachodesh hashvi'i hazeh chag shivas yomim? Is it then? And that's on the same consecutive, together with the chag. You also sit in the sukkah. Im shiva rishonim, im shiva achronim, or maybe it means 7 days later on. כשהוא אומר, ובחמישה עשר יום לחודש השביעי הזה, Chag HaSukkos, but now that the Pasuk added and it said, B'chamisha Osar Yom LaChodesh Chag HaSukkos, Shivas Yomim LaHashem. So it says that the 7 days is a Chag HaSukkos. That these 7 days of the Chag is not just Chag Shivas Yom, it's Chag HaSukkos Shivas Yom. Shiva Rishonim. So this tells us that we're talking about the 7 first days, the Lo Shiva Achronim, and not the 7 later days. So it's consecutive together with the Chag. That's why the Torah Sukkah is to tell you that that is when Sukkot takes place. And the Rebbe now brings down this Mefarshim, how they learn the Torah Kohanim. Mefarshim learn them Pshat, and the Mefarshim learn the Pshat in this Torah Kohanim. As the Shaila from Torah Kohanim, that the question of Torah Kohanim, Talmud Leimer Chulu, why did it have to say Chag HaSukkos is Farvosh state in the Pasuk the Lashon Chag HaSukkos? Why does it say in this Pasuk the language of Chag HaSukkos? V'ba'al, as in the Psukim state blois der Tzivui, in these verses, it only tells us about the command von Mikra Kodesh, that it should be called holy, that it's a holy day. Kom lechas avodah leisasu, oh, work avodah, which means the work that is prohibited on Yom Tov, you should not do. That's what the pasuk follows up is the Chag. And then the pasuk says ukorbanis Chag, and the special sacrifices for the holidays. And then later on, when the tzivu of yeshiva b'sukkah, and the command that one has to sit in the sukkah, steht erst später b'sefer parsha. That is written later on in the end of the parsha. Hadog gedarfstein, that's the question of the Torah Kohanim. Here it should have said Chag Shivas Yomim, not saying Chag HaSukkos Shivas Yomim. It's a festival Shivas Yomim, and then tell you about the festival of Sukkos on the word HaSukkos, not saying the word Chag HaSukkos. Of them is the Torah Kohanim Masbir. So here the Torah Kohanim explains. Lefi shenemar chulu. Shenemar chulu. But it means like this. Ayoy says their posik basukas teishu shivas yomim. The verse steht zum Sof Parsha. That is written in the end of the Parsha. Noch dem wer steht frier, following, after it's already stated earlier in posik. B'chamisha osar yom lachodesh hashvi, on the 15th day of the 7th month, which means on the 15th day of Tishrei. Goimer techoigos chag Hashem shivas yomim. You should celebrate the festival of Hashem for 7 days. And then in the end of the parsha, it says, celebrate Sukkot in the 7 days. So one would think that volt men nit gewusst, so then you would not know, Tzidar posik basukas teishu shivas yomim. So when the posik says, sit in the Sukkah 7 days, mean the zelbe zayin yomim von dem chag, it means the same 7 days of the holiday that we just mentioned, the Shiva Rishonim, which is the 7th first day, on Hebendik von Tezvav b'chodesh, to begin with the 15th of the month. Then Velcha the Pasuk at Frier, in which the Pasuk spoke earlier that on the 15th of the month starts the Yom Tov. That is when you start sitting in the Sukkah. Or you would be able to interpret as the Zayin Yomin from Shiva B'Sukkah, that the 7 days of sitting in the Sukkah, darfum kumen bazunda. They need to come separate. Besides the 7 days of the holiday, of the 7 days of the Chag, you have noch dem Chag Havai Shivas Yom. After the festival of Hashem for 7 days, you have to start another 7 days, Shiva Achronim. There will be 7 last days. On Ebendik von dem Tag noch Zayin Yomin. That starts with the day that follows the 7th day. The Rebbe stayed gleich bascholos ha-parsha. That's why right in the beginning of the parsha it says, B'chamisha osar yom lachodesh hashvi hazeh, which is the Chag, not plain Chag, Chag HaSukkos, Shivas Yomim. It's the Chag of Sukkos. Os is megalet. So this tells us, as the Basukkos teishu Shivas Yomim, that the sitting in the sukkah for 7 days is in dem Zman von Zayin Yemei HaChag. It's at the same time of the 7 days of the festival. That's when you're sitting in the sukkah. That's why the Torah calls it Chag HaSukkos. But starts with the 15th of the month, and the 7 days from the 15th of the month when there is the Chag, and that's when you sit in the sukkah. So, since this drosha is basically telling us that it's called the sukkahs just to teach us when sitting of the sukkah is, that it seems like there's no inherent connection of the chag and the sukkahs. It's a chag. It could be without the sukkahs, just so we know it's called chag sukkahs. Base. When Pashtus had Rosh in Teres Kohanim come to Ishlachayre, from the simple expounding of the Teres Kohanim, it would seem, it would turn out as the mitzvah basukkah teishus shivas yomim, that the mitzvah to sit in the sukkah for 7 days is nit verbunden mit etzem hachag. It's not tied to the festival itself. And with the other things of the festival, the korbanos and the isur melacha, as separate of sukkahs. Was wird herausgebracht gleich noch in dem in the erste Psukim. That has been brought out as soon as the first psukim say by Yemarishi Mikra Kodesh Kom Lechas Aveda Loisasu Shivish Yom Takribush Lashem, about what happens as soon as after the pasuk said there's a festival. The pasuk tells you what you do in those days. That on the first day it's called Kom Lechas Aveda Loisasu, and for 7 days you bring an offering to Hashem. Und euch nicht mit der Mitzvah von Netilas Dal Minim, and also that Sukkot doesn't have a special connection also to the mitzvah of taking the 4 species that we do on Sukkot. Now, the 4 species, the Torah connects to the Yom Tov. Was the Torah verbindos mit dem Chag. The Torah connects the taking of the 10 species with the Yom Tov. So, over there, so the Torah specifically associates the taking of the smachtem of the lulav of the 4 species with the Yom Tov, but not to connect it to the sukkah. Was the far, and because of this, because we say that sukkah is not part of the Yom Tov itself, it's something in addition. That is why in the Havamina, that's why it was the thought as Besukas Teishu Shivas Yomim, that when the Torah says to sit 7 days is nit in selben Zman von Chag und Mitzvah Sov Hanal. It's not in the same time of the Yom Tov and the above mitzvahs. There is an idea, there's a svara, there's a Havamina. You might think that maybe the festival of sitting in the sukkah should follow after the 7 days. That means that it's not inherently connected to the Chag, the idea of sitting in the sukkahs. The Torah lost not Herren mit zugeben the word HaSukkahs, but the Torah calls it the festival of sukkahs. The Torah just coming to teach us why is it called Chag HaSukkahs, as lepoil is the Chag HaSukkahs in dem Zman Shivas Yomim LaHashem. That in actuality, when is the festival of Sukkot? In the time of the 7 days, which begins on the 15th day of 7th month, which means on 15th of Nisa, on Tishrei, you're also on this Chodesh Hashvi, you sit in the sukkah then, but there is no inherent connection. They could be totally separate. Torah calls it Chag HaSukkos to teach you when the sukkah has to be done. That would seem like. However, the Rebbe says, "We can ober azayin nit lernen." We cannot learn so. The fact that the Torah teaches you when sukkah is, when the mitzvah of sukkah is, through saying that it's called Chag HaSukkos, that means that there is a connection. Warum von dem Gufa, from the fact itself was the Torah is made the them zman from Basukas Teshuvah. The Torah tells us when do you sit in the sukkah. Neither not through any other way, nor through them was the Shivas Yom La Hashem. Ruvtzichon Chag HaSukkos, just because the 7 days La Hashem is called Chag HaSukkos, is moving, it's understood as the mitzvah when yeshiva b'sukkah is nit blois chal in them zman from them Chag. It's not just to sit in the sukkah, it happens to be in the time of the Chag. Nor as hot ashaychen und is verbunden mit dem etzem Chag v'inyonim. But no, it does have, it is tied with the holiday itself and the aspects of the holidays, the korbanos, the tilas talad minim, noch mehr, even more than that. The Baal dos is the shame von Chag, since this is the name of the holiday, is move on. As dos is by jeden shame was in sagt sich heraus der teuchen binyan Chag, that this name of the Chag, we call it Chag HaSukkos, and anytime when there is a name, by jeden shame, whenever there is a name, in the name expresses itself the teuchen binyan Chag, the idea and the meaning of that Yom Tov. If you said that, but over verstehen, so if that's the case, that this is Taka Sukkos is part of the Chag, so we need to understand Aleph. Parvos beim Tzivui by Sukkos Teishu Shivas Yomim, when it says sit in the Sukkah 7 days, is in Posik Nitoken Hadgoshe. In the Posik there is no emphasis. Afilen Nitur Zogen Blois. The Torah should have said Basukas Teishvu B'Shivas Hayomim. So in those 7 days, and so wissen that those einen die 7 Tag von Chag HaAmurim Lifnei Zeh, that we should know that you're sitting in those 7 days of the previous day. It is part of the Yom Tov. So why does the Torah say sit for 7 days in the Sukkah without saying within the 7 days that we already talked about before? And number 2, Farvosh state nit gleich b'tchilas haparsha. Why does it not state in the very beginning of the parsha? Behem shertzu b'chamisha yom lachodesh hashvi'i azer Chag HaSukkos. To follow, as soon as the pasuk begins, that on the 15th day of the 7th month of Tishrei, it's the Chag HaSukkos, Torah should have said there, Shivas Yom Teshuv HaSukkos. You should follow with the mitzvah of Sukkah. Ubefrat, then as we compare this to the way it's written by Pesach, Ubefrat is state freir in pasuk by the Ersten Chag. This is the way it's stated previously in the verse. By the first Yom Tov, by Pesach, it says, "B'chamisha also yom lachodesh hazeh." On the 15th day of that month, the month of Nisan, is Chag HaMatzis LaHashem. And right away it tells you this is the Chag HaMatzis. And Shivas Yom Matzis Techelu, it tells you she eat 7 days the matzis. And then there comes the idea of Mikro Kodesh, Unisur Melocha, call it Kodesh, and the prohibition of Melocha. Unakrovas Hargabonis Shivas Yomim, and bringing the korban Shivas Yomim. But first, the pasuk tells you about the 7 days of Pesach, matzahs that you eat on the 7-day matzah over here. Torah ignores about the mitzvah of sitting in the sukkah, and only in the end, after talking about Mikro Kodesh and Isur Melocha and the korbanos, it goes back and tells you about the korbanos. So why is that? Gimel. So the Rebbe will explain now the connection between lulav and sukkah, which the Alter Rebbe in Shulchan Aruch writes that it's best to do the lulav and esrog, the brocha, to make it in the sukkah. And the question is it because everything we do, is it part of the mitzvah of sukkah? Everything that we do during the Yom Tov of Sukkah should be done in Sukkah. So since we do a lulav, we do that in the Sukkah as well. Or is it the better way for the mitzvah of lulav that the lulav should be done in a Sukkah? The difference would be what happens if you're potter from sukkah. It's raining, let's say. So if it's because of the mitzvah of sukkah and it's raining, so go ahead and do the lulav inside. But if it is because of the mitzvah of lulav, so maybe you should wait, because the mitzvah of lulav, the best way to do the mitzvah of lulav is in the sukkah. Wait till it finishes raining so you can do the mitzvah of lulav in a better way. Gimel. But man das verstehen behagdi mahasbore in der Sheiches al Nigla, in the connection based on Nigla, zwischen mitzvah sukkah, mitzvahs netilas lulav, between sukkah, the mitzvah of sukkah, and the mitzvah of taking the lulav. The Rebbe later on in the Sikha will explain al pi Pnimius and Yon al pi Chasidus. But right now, the Rebbe is explaining al pi Nigla, the connection between sukkah, mitzvahs, netilas lulav. Was Chotsch als euch netilas lulav wird in der Parsha abgeteilt von Chag HaSukkos. Although the mitzvah of netilas lulav in the parsha is separated from the Yom Tov of Sukkah, so there is no tie from lulav with Sukkah in the pasuk. Verbindet aber die Torah mit dem Chag HaYeshivas Yomim, but it is connected to the festival of Hashem for 7 days that we do the lulav. Nit the Sukkah canal. This is not like the Sukkah in which the Torah does not speak about the Chag, calls it Chag HaSukkos, but it doesn't say in the pasuk afterward that there should be Shivas Yomim in the Sukkah after the Chag, but it's only calls it Chag HaSukkos. But over here, the Torah says that this should be the Chag Havaya Shivas Yomim. So this is not so it is still connected with the Yom Tov. But what's the connection of Sukkah with Lulav? Sukkah seems to be separate. The Alter Rebbe says B'Sidurei in the Siddur as mitzvahs nitilosei fun Lulav. The mitzvah, when we take the lulav, the 4 species, is besukkah, he mitzvah menamuvchar. To take it in the sukkah is the mitzvah in its choicest form. The best to take it in the sukkah. So this seemingly is because Kabbalistic reasons. It would seem maybe this is an idea according to Kabbalah. Und der Mocker from them is in Kisvei HaArizal. And the source for this is in the writings of the Arizal. Aber yesh loimar, but the Rebbe says we could say, as Azevi Ali Nyonim in Kabbalah and Pnimis HaTorah, just like all matters in the Kabbalah and in the inner part of Torah, Hodos Eich HaMoker v'Hazbora al Pinigla. This also has a source and can also be explained according to the revealed part of Torah. Bifrat, especially as the Alter Rebbe is Mishane from Loshen, was stated in Kisvei HaRizal. Especially the Alter Rebbe changes the language, which states in Kisvei HaRizal, over there it says, Toiv levarech v'luki yitzeba. It's best to make the bracha. Und schreibt mitzvah menamuchar. He writes it the mitzvah in the choicest way. That means that perhaps the Alter Rebbe is telling us that this is not just Api Kabbalah, this is also Api Nigla. Dalit. So l'chayre wollt man gekannt sagen, so l'chayre we could say, as those was netilas lulav besukkah is mitzvah min amuvchar. The fact that taking the lulav in the sukkah is the best way to do the mitzvah is mitzvah the mitzvah sukkah. That is not because of the mitzvah of lulav, that's because of the mitzvah of sukkah. Hayos as the mitzvah for sukkah is teishu kein taduru, that the mitzvah of sukkah needs to be that you should sit in the sukkah just like you live in a home a whole year, which basically means that everything that you do in your home. So in the sukkah's time, we do it in the sukkah. Sheyiyeh, bro, quoting from the Shulchan Aruch, Sheyiyeh oichel v'shoyse v'yoshon v'yitayil, that he should eat, drink, sleep, and walk around, the door and live the sukkah kol zayin hayomim, to live in the sukkah in the entire 7 days, by bayom ben balaylo, whether by day, whether by night. Just like he lives in his home, that's the way he should be living in the sukkah. And anything he would not do outside of his home, which means everything he does in his home and not outside, he should not do it outside of the sukkah. To the extent that this is such an important halacha, it's as necessary a reason and an allowance to Megan Lernen sukkah, to allow one to learn and study outside of the sukkah, because you should be doing everything in the sukkah. Allowance because you can concentrate better, you can learn better, but technically everything needs to be done in the sukkah. Is doch von dem move on bepashtus. So from that it's very understood simply. Also, when you take the lulav, was is from the inyonim, was der mensch tut b'meshach dimei hasukas. Those are from the matters that a person does in the duration of the days of sukkahs. The arzayin b'tech sukkah needs to be b'tech sukkah, just like anything else. Especially when we talk about a mitzvah of sukkah, which is important, as mitzvosei achashvei, the fact that it's a mitzvah makes it an important part. Und das hat der Farakvias. So that has a permanence, like in the sukkah and ara, you can eat outside, not the kvias. But the fact that shaking a lulav, doing a mitzvah, makes it important, makes it in kavuas. So if we see that even just to walk around, similar Dav Zayin sukkah needs to be in the sukkah. Maybe Bekol Shekain as Netilas Lulav Dav Zayin the sukkah, for sure that the taking of the lulav need to be in the sukkah. But if this was the case, then the Alter Rebbe would bring down this din of shaking the lulav in the sukkah as part of the mitzvah of sukkahs. Von dem aber was der Alter Rebbe schreibt dem Inyan Hanal, the fact that the Alter Rebbe writes this idea, zwischen the din and netilas lulav, amongst the laws of taking the lulav, unoich von sein Loschen, also in language, mitzvahs netilas sukkah, the mitzvah is taking them in the sukkah. It's not the mitzvah of the sukkah to use them, but the mitzvah to take them is besukkah, mitzvah namuvchar. That's the choice is mitzvah, but his mudgish that inyan from netilas lulav. Here we emphasize the idea of taking the lulav is muchach. So this is evidence as a nit adin in sukkah. And it does not mean that this would be a law in the sukkah to do another item that you do on sukkahs in the sukkah. Nor adin umitzvah min amuvchar mitzvahs netilas lulav. But this is rather a halacha and a mitzvah min amuvchar in the laws of lulav. The lulav needs to be taken in the sukkah. What's the difference between whether we say that it's a mitzvah in the lulav to be taken in the sukkah, or it's a mitzvah of the sukkah that the lulav needs to be shaking in it? So the Rebbe explains now the difference would be what happens if you're potter from the sukkah. Amongst the two explanations, there's also a practical different. In fall, when me is potter min sukkah, in a case when you're exempt from sukkah. Say that it's raining or similar. One who's in pain is exempt from sukkah, so you don't have to be in the sukkah. So it makes a difference. In mitzvah sukkah, if taking the lulav in the sukkah is only the mitzvah and the choicest way that it's part of the mitzvah of sukkah, that you have to do everything in the sukkah. Just like all the other aspects of eating and drinking, similarly, with which you're mekayim the mitzvahs yeshiva b'sukkah, which you fulfill the sitting b'sukkah, eating, drinking, everything you have to do in the sukkah. So what is the din when it's raining? Is be'ez that is potter from sukkah. So when you're exempt from sukkah, sulib yiridas gishamim ukiyetzabayim. So now there's raining. So now he has to bench lulav and esrog, and he's exempt from sukkah. If it's a mitzvah sukkah, he doesn't have to wait. Definitely warten mit netilas lulav bis der Regen wird aufhören. He doesn't have to wait before he takes the lulav for the rain to stop, because there's no obligation of sukkah then. And if the reason we're doing it in the sukkah is because of the sukkah, now there's no obligation. It's raining. So there's no point in waiting for it to stop raining. Because now there's no obligating. He's sitting in the sukkah. He can bench the lulav in home. Just like he doesn't need to wait with eating and drinking or the other things till the rain will stop. He doesn't have to wait, because right now you're not mechuyev, and this is one of the things you have to do in the sukkah. If it's raining, you don't have to do it in the sukkah. You don't have to bench lulav and esrog in the sukkah. But this is in addition. This is also a choicest way of doing the lulav. Is afal pi as if im is its base in its ageshem nitok in chiyuv mitzvah sukkah. Although that at the moment when the rain is coming down, there's no obligation of this mitzvah sukkah. Bibal that is mechuy benetilas lulav, but since he is obligated in the mitzvah, he has to take the lulav was the shleimus from their mitzvah namuchar. And what's the choicest way of doing the lulav? Is when zived giton in sukkah, when it's done in the sukkah. Is mestaber, so then it makes sense as is min amufchar zu warten. Now the best thing would be is to wait bis der Regen wird aufhören, until the rain will stop. Kedei zu mekayim sein mitzvahs nikulose b'sukkah. So you should be able to do it in the most perfect way, to make sure to take the lulav and the minim in the sukkah, which is the choicest way. And that would be the difference between these two appointments. But since the Alter Rebbe brings it down in the mitzvah of lulav, so it seems clearly that it's an advantage of lulav as well, and one should need to wait for that. As the Rebbe will continue to explain the Gedorim for Sukkot and the Gedorim of Pesach in the continuation of this year. Oisei. In Oisei, the Rebbe is going to explain that Adrabah, that by Pesach, in which the Torah associates it with the psukim right away following after it says Chag, the Torah brings down to the mitzvah to tell us, which is to eat matzahs shivas yomim, to tell us that is not what the Chag is about. The Etzem HaChag is there because this is the 15th, this is the Zman of Yitzias Mitzrayim. That's why we celebrate it. And that's why it doesn't say Shivas Yomim. The Yom HaRishon, that 15th day is the Chag, because that's the Zman of Yitzias Mitzrayim. However, then the Torah tells you to do different things, and you have Mikro Kodesh and Komlach Zaved Leisasu and the Korbanis. But by Sukkot is Adrabah. The Torah calls it Chag HaSukkos Shivas Yom, because that is the essence of the Chag, the level of Sukkot. And the reason why the Torah doesn't write it right away is to tell you that it's not just an act that you do, and that's why we call it Chag HaSukkos, but that's part of the etzem of the Chag itself. Let's look inside. Very interesting, and just the opposite as it would appear. Let's look inside. Hey, der biur b'chol ze yesh lemer. So what is the connection in all this? So we can say the Parsha Seinu in Parshas Hamoedes, in the portion in our Parsha when it talks about the holidays, it goes through all the holidays. Gefindt man nur zwei Yomim Tovim. So we find there's only two holidays, two Yom Tovs. Was bei sie wird der Chag bezeichnet mit Hashem Miyuchad, which the Yom Tov, that Chag, the festival is described with a specific name. We have Chag HaMatzos and Chag HaSukkos. Those are the two names given to the Chag. But when you look at the Pesukim, there are differences between them. Number one, Aleph, the first chiluk. B'chag hamatzos steht uvachamisha osor yom lachodesh hazeh, on the 15th day. We're talking about one day, the 15th day, is Chag hamatzos laHashem. The festival of matzos laHashem. It doesn't say the Chag hamatzos for 7 days. It just says on the 15th day Chag hamatzos laHashem, which means der Shem Chag hamatzos steht nicht bescheiches zu alle 7 Tag. The name Chag hamatzos is not written with regards to all 7 days. Now compare that to what it says by Sukkot. So by Chag HaSukkot state Chag HaSukkot Shivas Yomim LaHashem. By the Chag HaSukkot it says right away 7 days to Hashem. So here it's just Chamisha Osor Yom LaChodesh as a Chag hamatzos, and over there it's 7 days Chag hamatzos. That's one difference. Base, on the other hand, as the Rebbe has said actually earlier, but Chag hamatzos is der Posik gleich mamshich und zog. The Posik immediately continues and says, Shivas Yomim Matzos Techelu. It says Chag hamatzos by Yom Harishon, 7 days you should eat matzos. As opposed to by Sukkot, it doesn't say it right away after it says Shivas Chag HaSukkos, Shivas Yomim. By Chag HaSukkos wird das gesagt, bei Sukkot Shav Teshu Shivas Yomim, that you need to see in the Sukkah, nicht bis Miches LaHashem, not when it says Chag LaHashem, right in the beginning of the Parsha of Sukkot, Noresh B'Sefer Parsha, the end of the Parsha, the Torah talks to you about the details of 7 days sitting in the Sukkah. So Yesh Leimar, so therefore the Rebbe says we can say, as the Hasbara from the Chilukim came and uplernen, that explaining these differences, we can learn another different that we find between the Yomim Tovim. And that is, what's the name that people call them? Sukkos is called Sukkos in the Torah and by everybody. But Chag hamatzos in the Torah it's called Chag hamatzos. By people call it Pesach. It's telling that the festival itself is not connected inherently with matzahs. We call it Pesach. It means it's not only. Sukkos, everybody calls it Sukkos. Chag hamatzos verd beloshen Chazal, the matzahs Yom Tov, in the language of our sages of blessed memory, on Eichin im Loshen Amurgal bin Minhag Yisrael, and also in the common language, Jewish tradition, L'Shem B'nei Odom, how do people refer to the Chag hamatzos? Angerufen euch miteinander nomen. It's also called, it has another name. We also use another name to call this Yom Tov. We call it the Angerufen euch miteinander, Chag HaPesach. Mashenke bei Chag HaSukkos, but as opposed to by the Yom Tov Sukkos, gefindt man nicht am Zolim Anrufen miteinander nomen. We don't find it to be called a different name. Es wird mit demselben Namen angerufen bei Chazal, bei Minhag Yisrael. The same name of Sukkot is it called in our sages of blessed memory and also in the Jewish tradition. Bekol analysis verstandig, so from all the above is understood. As der Teuchel von dem ganzen Chag HaPesach, that the contents of the entire Chag HaPesach, the 7 days of Pesach, Torah never calls Chag hamatzos Shivas Yomim, only says B'Yom Harishon. But steht nicht in Ganzen in dem, was is Chag hamatzos. It does not consist totally that it's Chag hamatzos. That's not what the Yom Tov is about. That's what we do on Chag hamatzos, that we eat matzos. But it's not the contents, because the Torah doesn't say the 7 days Chag hamatzos. And we call it Pesach. Mashenke by Chag HaSukkos is those Sukkos that you could take on a Chag. By Sukkos, that is what the Yom Tov is. The Yom Tov is Sukkos. Und the river. B'shas the Torah zogt b'chamisha osor yom lachodesh hazeh Chag HaMatzis laHashem. And Torah says that it's on the 15th day of Pesach of the first month of Nisan is Chag HaMatzis laHashem. Taich the posuk like up. So the posuk translates it Shivas Yomim Matzis Techelu, that you eat matzahs for 7 days, to tell you that that is something that you do. It's not the Yom Tov. As nor to leave them prat for achilas matzah. That it's only because of that detail that you eat matzahs, we call it Chag HaMatzahs, but it's not really, the Yom Tov is not Chag HaMatzahs. Only because of that prat, of that detail, wird Chag HaMatzahs. Nicht, weil das ist der Teuchen Chag und alle Shivas Yom Shvoi. That's not what the meaning, the content of this Yom Tov and all 7 days. It doesn't say about 7 days, and it just says it's only called the Chag HaMatzahs because we eat matzahs for 7 days. As opposed to when we're talking about the 15th day of the month in the 7th month of Tishrei, is Chag HaSukkos Shivas Yomim. The festival of Sukkot is 7 days LaHashem. Das is der Teuchen von dem Chag von the Shivas Yomim. This is the content, the meaning of the holiday. For the 7 days, it's Chag HaSukkos Shivas Yomim. Mitam ze gu versteht nicht der Zivui Basukkos Teshuvah Shivas Yomim. And for that reason, Taka doesn't say immediately Basukkos Teshuvah Shivas Yomim gleich noch Chag HaSukkos genau. Not immediately after Chag HaSukkos, like we said before, it's only in the end of the parsha. Why? While demut what men gemeint, had it been brought down in the minute right away, by Chag HaMatzos, we would think it's just like by Chag HaMatzos. As a wird angerufen Chag HaSukkos, blois zu lieb der Yeshiva besukkah Shabbai. That would be explaining that it's only for sitting in the sukkah. That's why the Torah brings it right away. No, the Torah leaves Chag HaSukkos. This is the holiday, not it's a holiday of Sukkos. Not because actually you're sitting in a sukkah, and that's what we gave it the name for that. No, but the holiday in itself is Sukkos. We would say maybe that's not the name of, that's not the contents of the holiday. So therefore, the Torah leaves that out to later. What you're sitting, yes, you're sitting it, but the holiday is the holiday Sukkot. But what does that mean? Over here, the holiday is not matzahs, and here the holiday is Sukkot. And the Rebbe explains that over here the holiday is because it's the 15th of Nisan. It's the time that Yidden went out of Mitzrayim. That's the holiday. And then we eat matzahs. But Sukkot is punk verkehrt. It's not a time anything. The time is that we're making our Sukkot. That makes it into a holiday. So, and that's why, because we're sitting in the Sukkah, and that we chose that time, the Eibishter chose it, that it should be not in the time. Yidden went out in the Oviv, went out in the spring, and that we sit Sukkot when everybody is going into their homes. So that tells us that it's the sukkah that makes that up to the holiday. Let's look inside Vav. That's what's the explanation in this? The Yom Chamish also l'chodesh Nisan is ausgeteilt als azman miyuchad beikar. What is the distinction of the 15th day of the month of Nisan? Makes it into a special day. It's mainly beikar. It's not because there's a mitzvah to eat matzah that makes it into a special time. No. Why is the 15th day of Nisan? It's a special day because on that day we went out of Egypt. So it becomes a Chag v'Yom because celebrating, commemorating going out of Mitzrayim. As the pasuk says, and this day shall be lochem lizikorin, as a day to remember. You should celebrate it, a festival for Hashem for generations to come. And then and the fact that it is a Yom Tov, it's a special time, is the sibah to the mitzvah shabai, that brings the reason for the mitzvahs that are in the Yom Tov. Koilo the mitzvah of achilas matzah, also the mitzvah of eating matzah, it's becomes part of the Yom Tov. Because it's a Yom Tov, and because we're remembering it, and because of the special Yom Tov, that's why we eat matzahs. As opposed to the 7 days of starting with the 15th of Tishrei, the 7th month, is nit gizman b'yuchad umuvdul mitzadatzma. It's not a specific, distinguished time on its own. There's nothing special over there. No lehepach, it goes the other way around. So leave der chiyuv mitzvah from yeshiva b'sukkah shivas yomim, because there is an obligation and there's a mitzvah to sit in the sukkah for 7 days. Hayois, as in these shivas yomim is not the mitzvah for yeshiva b'sukkah. Since in these 7 days there is a mitzvah of sitting in the sukkah. Ubefrat, it's not just any mitzvah, it's a mitzvah that encompasses the person, but even as the mitzvah for sukkah nimmt dem ganzen Menschen, it surrounds, encompasses the entire human being, v'chol inyonav, and all of his matters, b'meshach l'shivas yom, for the 7 days. Teishu ke'ein toduru kinal, is the living in the sukkah just like you live in your home. As it is dor b'sukkah kol hazayin yomim ben bayomim b'layla, he lives in the sukkah all 7 days, by day and by nighttime. Veren durch dem the shivas yomim, that makes through that the 7 days yomim yuchad machag l'Hashem, they become a festival to Hashem. It's the sukkah that turns it into a Yom Tov, because we're sitting 7 days in the sukkah, as opposed to Pesach. It's the time of Pesach. And that makes it a special day. And therefore, because it's a special day, the Torah says to go ahead and eat matzah. In a little bit of a different style, say the same idea. Shabbos v'Yom Tov zokman b'tfilah, we always say on Shabbos and Yom Tov in the davening, Zeicher li'tzias Mitzrayim. We're always remembering the exodus of Egypt. Es es in them achiluk, but there is a distinction. B'chaga Pesach is thus. Why do we say Pesach? To remember. But there we're just remembering the day, but there is remembering this day that you went out of Mitzrayim. That's why we make it a celebration for generations to come. As the Zechira in Zman from Yitzias Mitzrayim, that mentioning it in the time of Yitzias Mitzrayim, which is beyond any other Shabbos and Yom Tov, makes that Machdem Zman HaChag, that makes it into a festival. Mashenkin b'Shabbos u'Shvuos, as opposed to Shabbos and Shavuos, since it's not the day of the Exodus of Egypt, we're just remembering. So on Shabbos that we say Zecher L'Tzias Mitzrayim, and on Shavuos, which is Yom Tov, we also say Zecher L'Tzias Mitzrayim. It's not that day. It doesn't make it into a Chag because of the Zecher L'Tzias Mitzrayim, but it does on Pesach. Ubeyoser, and more than this is by Chag HaSukkos, Zog the Torah. By Sukkot festival, the Torah says, "L'man yedu derisechem ki b'Sukkos hishavti as b'nei Yisrael b'yitziya Yisrael Eretz Mitzrayim." It's b'chlal not the zman that makes it into a chag, because the Torah says the generation, they should know that I settled the Yidden in Sukkot when I took them out of Eretz Mitzrayim. Not now, not the zman. Not like Pesach, which is this man. Remember what happened at another time. This says, although it's not in the time when the Eibishter settled the Yidden in Sukkot when he took them out of Egypt. Und the Torah sagt dem Tam, nicht wenn the Torah sagt on dem Tzivui HaChag b'tchilas HaParsha. And the Torah gives the reason of Basukah Seshafti Yes, Bnei Yisrael, not in the beginning when he talks about the Yom Tov, in the beginning of the parsha, like by Pesach, nor if their mitzvah Basukis Teishvu Shivas Yomim. Adrab. The Teure sagt dem Tam nicht, wenn die Teure sagt on dem Zivat Chag B'tchil Saparsha. Nor if der Mitzvah Basukis Teishvu Shivas Yomim. That's when the Torah says Basukis Shafti as Bnei Yisrael is not when we start talking about we don't even know, just the Irish says Zachag, but it's not the Basukis Shafti. That's not when the Torah says sit in the sukkah because I sat in the sukkahs. It's in the end of the parsha where it says Ba'adrab. Mitzadem Bodos is Dafke nit be Mehaovim. And why is so the timing is not the essential by sukkahs, the timing doesn't make it because this whole timing wasn't then, and the Torah doesn't give the reasoning then. It's all later. It's only given for the mitzvahs of the Vesukos Teishu Shivas Yomim. V'adarabbe mitzadem v'dos is davke nit be meya ha'aviv, and it's davke because it's not in the spring. It's not in the right time when they went out of Mitzrayim. In the Zman for Yitzis Mitzrayim. Is damol the mitzvah in Shiva Besukkah in the Chag HaSukkahs. Then is when you sit in the Sukkah, not during the time of Pesach time, not when they went out. Verzokt in Torah said in Torah because we didn't want to make it in there. So, therefore, this all tells us that the time of Sukkahs that's not the reason for it. On the contrary, the reason for the festival is because because we have a command to sit in the sukkah that makes the time into a Yom Tov. Alpizei's move on. So Zion. So according to this, understood as the tzivuyim b'negeya hachag uproto v'shteim b'scholos haparsha. That the commands as it relates to Sukkos and all the details, v'shteim b'scholos haparsha b'yem arishim mikra kodesh kom lechas avedu lasasu shivas yomim. Everything that you should not do for 7 days. The work takriv shel Hashem goimer. Before we talk about Sukkos, seine nit kein besondere inyonim. They are not separate aspect. Was haben nit kein Verbund mit dem Yeshiva Sukkah. They are not distinguished and separate than the obligation of sitting in the Sukkah b'mikemenikana, like you would think. Oh, it has nothing to do with it because the pasuk talks about it later. But adrab, on the contrary, the Geder Chag HaSukkos is Shaykh and Chal Eichav Zeh. There include Chag HaSukkos Shivas Yomim applies to everything that you do on Sukkot. Because what makes it is not the Yom Tov, the sitting in the Sukkah, but the fact that you sit there. The fact is that because you sit in the Sukkah, that makes it a Chag, and that's why we do all the Inyonim. She'enke b'Chag Pesach. Was that is a Chag Asaning if not from Matzis over there? It's a Chag by itself. Because it's not it's based on the Zman. But that is a Chag. Als an Inyan bifnei atzmei for matzahs. It's a Yom Tov separate from matzahs. You eat matzahs in the Yom Tov, but the Yom Tov is to Zeicher L'Yetzias Mitzrayim. And then you have an Inyan bifnei atzmei for matzahs. It's independent of the matzahs. So and the Al Inyonim, those who said is Mikra Kodesh, so all the matters that call it kodesh, that zibui from kol molocha leisasu, the command of not doing molocha, when the akrovas hakarbonis b'meshach shiva yizmei hachag, and the offering of the karbonis 7 day of chag, nit verbunden mit inyan hamatzis shaboy, but mit netzem hachag. They're not tied to the matzis that are in it, because the Yom Tov is not the matzis. The Yom Tov is the remembrance of Yitzias Mitzrayim, nor mit netzem hachag, with the chag itself. Mashenkin Basukkas, the Etzem Achag is connected to the Sukkah itself. So everything that is done is because of Sukkahs. So Ches Aprianal is move on. Oich Benegeya, the Kiyuma Mitzvah for Yeshiva Besukkah. So we also understand as far as it relates to fulfilling the mitzvah of sitting in the Sukkah, on the Shaykhs from Mitzvahs Netilas Lulav to the mitzvah for Sukkah, and the connection of the mitzvah of taking the lulav to the mitzvah of sukkah. Keniska le'il, as we said before, is beim tzibui by sukkah teishu shivas yomim. When the Seir says tivas yomim, you should sit in the sukkah. Nit gizog geworden besukkah teishu b'shivas hayomim. Doesn't say in the 7 days, in the previous 7 days of the holidays, sit in the sukkah. As though zaynim from freer zayin yimei achag. In other words, there is 7 days of the Yom Tov, and now in those 7 days we're sitting in the sukkah. Because the fact that you have to sit 7 days in the sukkah is not the farbo design shivas simei chag. It's not because there's 7 days of holidays that's why you have to sit. No lahepech. Besukkahs teishvu, the fact that you're sitting in the sukkah, macht geder zayin meyachag, makes it, defines them as the 7 days of the holidays because of the mitzvah of yeshiva besukkah kenal baruch. The Rebbe says, "V'alpizeh yumtak loshon Rashi b'negei shmini atzeres." Well, the language that Rashi uses as far as Shmini Atzeres, the 8th day, will become sweetened really well understood. If that was the Gemara zokt as it is a regel b'fnei atzmei, the Gemara says that Shmini Atzeres is an independent Yom Tov, abgeteilt from Chag HaSukkos, distinguished from Sukkos. Taich to Rashi, so Rashi says she'ein yoshvim b'sukkah, because it's separate, because you don't sit in the sukkah. In other words, the regel for Chag HaSukkos is their mesuvav ve'inyan for Shiva b'sukkah. The festival of Sukkos is the result, is the consequent of sitting in the sukkah. That makes it a Chag HaSukkos. The etzem haregel b'shteit in them was yoshvim b'sukkah. The holiday itself, the Yom Tov, consists in that you sit in the sukkah. Or b'signa nachar, use another language, the chag wird aufgetan durch the yeshiva b'sukkah. The chag is made up by sitting in the sukkah. Shivas yomim b'poyel, teishvu ke'ein toduru, that makes up the sukkah. Li'idoch, but on the other hand, by lulav, shteit u'lekachtem lachem b'yem harishon goyim. Over there it says you take it on the first day. The mitzvah for Netilas Lulav is Valdos is Yom Harishon, by Yom Harishon, in the first day. So Yom Harishon for Chag HaSukkos. Is B'meili is move on. As the Zaman mitzvah, the time of the mitzvah, the Shem mitzvah, the name of the mitzvah, the Daled meaning, is Chal by Yom Harishon. That applies on the first day. The Gedushas Chag HaSukkos is goyrem der chiyuv v'shem mitzvah aleim. That brings about, because it is Sukkos, that brings about the obligation and the mitzvah on the Daled Minim, because it's in Sukkos. You're in the first day of Sukkos. V'bal the shleimas geder v'gedushas achag is durch the yeshiva b'sukkah b'poel. And since the wholesome definition, the sanctity of the holiday, what makes it a chag is durch the yeshiva b'sukkah b'poel, that you're sitting in the sukkah makes that up into a Yom Tov, is the b'meila move on, so it's understood. Therefore, As menem talulav besukkah. So when you're taking a lulav in the sukkah, it does need bloizadin in kein tuduru. It's not just a din in the sukkah that you're doing everything in the sukkah just like you would live in your home from sukkah. Was durch dem kommt zu in mitzvah sukkahs, which adds to the mitzvah sukkah. Nor does is a din in the tilas lulav, but actually this becomes a din in the mitzvah of lulav, taking lulav. And is moisif shleimus in them shame bekim a mitzvah of lulav, because lulav is by Yom Harishon, and what makes Yom Harishon the sukkah? But this adds to the mitzvah of sukkah, the mitzvah of sukkah Yom Harishon becomes through the actual sitting in sukkah. So it adds shleimus in them shame bekim a mitzvah of lulav. It makes it a mitzvah and a mubcha, the mitzvah of choice, because you are doing it in Yom Harishon of Sukkot, which is made up to yeshiva b'sukkah through doing the lulav in the sukkah, makes it a mitzvah min hamuvcha. The Rebbe now is going to explain all this in the Pnimis Yonim. First test. The Rebbe is now going to explain the Pnimis Yonim. The biur v'chol hanal, the Pnimis Yonim b'avedas ha'odom, the biur and all the above in the inner matter of things and in the service of man. Amavurli il, this that we explained before, as there's man from the Chamisha Osor, L'chodesh Hashvi Hazeh, that the time of the 15th day of the 7th month, which is Sukkot, Vertachag Mitzad der Mitzvah von Basukkot Teishus Shivas Yomi, because of Sukkot, you should be 7 days. Is in then do amaila, then there is an advantage to it. The gabi dem was bachagamatzis is there's man moved on mitzadatzma, that by Yom Tov of Pesach Chagamatzis over there it's not the person's avoida, the sukkah makes the chag, but it's the Eibush that makes the chag, because it's the time to remember Yetzias Mitzrayim. Is there's man moved on mitzad atzmi? It's in its own distinction because of the time of commemorates the Yetzias Mitzrayim. There's an advantage when you make it up versus that it comes from above. Shas as kedusha sachag vert evgiton mitzad peulos haodom lemato. When the sanctity of the Yom Tov is accomplished because of the acts of the person below, Hodos Avirkung in Welt, then that has an impact in the world if the person is involved in making up the sanctity of the Yom Tov, it impacts the world. Hayois as dos poilt euch in dem Zman oilam vidos mitzad atzmi, since it impacts the time which is in the world as it's by itself. You have the world being impacted not from above because the Eibishter makes it a special time, but we are the one, the world, we are in the world are making up that time. Nit hobendik in shayches to Kedusha. It doesn't have in essence a connection to Kedusha. We are making up the Kedusha. When there's man is be'etzem moved mitzad l'mayla, as opposed when the time is in essence distinguished above, this is a unique time. Und der Kanal drückt sich aus in den Unterschied zwischen den zwei Mitzvahs Gufa. And this difference that we were talking about here above, about coming from above or by the person, expresses himself in the Unterschied zwischen den zwei Mitzvahs Gufa, the distinction between these two mitzvahs themselves. Achilas matzah und yeshivas besukkahs, eating matzah and sitting in the sukkah. Achilas matzah is in yon achila shel mitzvah. Eating matzah is, what is matzah? It's eating a mitzvah over there. As is nit kein achila v'ser volt giton belav hochi, nit b'shu mitzvah. It's not something that he would eat, that he would do without being a mitzvah. If it wasn't a mitzvah, he wouldn't eat matzah. Mashen came by the mitzvah of yeshiva b'sukkah, as opposed to by the mitzvah of yeshiva b'sukkah, is just nit in inyonim mechudoshim. It does not encompass new, novel ideas. Was very giton l'shem mitzvah. This is done now for a mitzvah. Adarabe ke'en taduru. This everything should be in a normal way, like you would live normally. In Yonim was geheren zum Seder HaChaim from Yodin mentioned. Those matters that belong in the regular order of life of every person, need haben die Kinshayches to Yiddishkeit and Torah mitzvahs without having a connection to Yiddishkeit Torah mitzvahs. Und doch is mit dem Mekayim mitzvah besuka, and yet he fulfills with them from the mundane, the regular stuff, daily stuff of sitting in the sukkah. You Mekayim mitzvah, but you're not doing anything unique. Und das ist der Ilu von Chag HaSukkos, and this is the advantage of Chag HaSukkos. Kol HaShona darf man haben an Aveda Gedoylo. All year round, you need to work very hard. It's a big service to stehen in Amatzev, to stand in a situation from Kol Masecha Yilu Shem Shomayim. All your actions should be for the sake of heaven. B'chol drachecha de'eyu, know Hashem in all your ways. That's all year. It takes a lot of work. Wenn es kommt aber Chag HaSukkos, wird euch getan. But when it comes to Sukkot, then the accomplishment is Kol HaNogoysev from Chayev Yom Yom Meshehem, that all of his conduct of his daily life, day to day, as is, Zainen and Inyan Shal Mitzvah, they become a matter of mitzvah. That's why this also comes down physically. As the ganzer Mensch, from head to toe, from his head to his feet, mit seine levushim, including his garments, gefinnen sich in Sukkah, all in the Sukkah. Was bei kein other mitzvah gefindt man nicht as the ganze mitzvah. We don't find it by any other mitzvah that his entire existence, und alle seine Inyonim, and all of his aspects that go along the garments, all seine herumgeringelt von a mitzvah from dem Ebershter should be circled from a mitzvah from Hashem. And this is because the whole idea is that we take the daily, the regular stuff, and we make that. There's nothing new here. This is the regular stuff, but we encompass it in the mitzvah. Yud, that means the Alter Rebbe Meisiv Madgish. So here the Alter Rebbe adds and emphasizes a mitzvah's netilas lulav besukkah is mitzvah and amuvcha from lulav. That to take the lulav in the sukkah is the choicest way of the mitzvah of the lulav. And there says lefikoch baboiker koidem shab yispalo. In the morning before he davens, ba'ide besukkah, while you're in the sukkah, yivorach, you should make the bracha. Because the bracha is on the tilas lulav, making the brachas on the lulav, taking the lulav. We can doch meinen, as the Neitigkeit zu sein, darum genommen von mitzvah sukkah, that the important to be encompassed, surrounded by the mitzvah sukkah from Ratzon HaElyon, Hashem's will, is the game beikar tzazalcha b'seinem farnumen mit inyonim v'tzurachim gashmin. That is important. That touches mainly those that are preoccupied with matters and needs, physical needs. Of a nitzah zelcha v'seinen in sug from lulav, but not those who are the category of a lulav. Kapis tomorim, palm tree of the tomorim. Sheyesh bo tam, there is a taste in the tomorim. Sheyesh b'hem Torah, which means they have Torah. That's the resembled Torah, is the lulav. Bald as is eine ständig verbunden mit dem Ebersten durch sehr limudat Torah. Why are they considered lulavs, kapis tomorim, dates, taste? Because they're always connected to Hashem learning Torah. So maybe why would they need to be encompassed? Similarly, is in the service of all people. One can think, understands that his eating and his drinking, darfen sein hereingenommen und herumgenommen from mitzvah sukkah. They need to be taken in, and they need to be surrounded by the mitzvah sukkah. Aber favos darf man haben die Bavoren nicht. But why do we need the caution as the mitzvah and the rotzen elyon von sukkah, that this mitzvah and the supreme will of sukkah is all arum nemen sein limud v'asoga b'Torah? Why does it need to encompass his study and his grasp in Torah? He must actually also do mitzvahs. One who says, I just have Torah, no mitzvahs, really doesn't even have Torah. Aber das is mitzad dem inyan ha-sukkah. That comes from the perspective that the sukkah was gedra is to duru, that the idea of the sukkah, you live in it, arum nemen, the mentioning ganzen, that needs to encompass the person totally, so he needs to be surrounded by the mitzvahs. You can't have it just Torah. Das is aber lechoyle nit an inyan in etilas lulav, but that's not a matter in the taking of the lulav, in the Torah part of him. That etzem halimud v'asoga b'Torah, the essence is study and a grasping the Torah, with balders durch dem shoim verbunden mit chochmaser shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He's already connected and tied to the wisdom of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Why does he have to do in the sukkah because of the lulav? Meila because of the sukkah, because yes, but not because of the lulav. Sagt man as mitzvahs nitilose besukkah is mitzvah men amuvchar. The mitzvah to take it in the sukkah is the mitzvah of choice. Das is negeyet zu sein havona v'asoga b'Torah. This also is connected. This touches his understanding and his grab b'Torah. Nemt chochmas haTorah. You take the wisdom of Torah, which is chochmas u'ritzonu shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is the wisdom of the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When der hert und margish, when he senses and he feels, those was learned in an inyan, was is im makif, when he learns something which surrounds him, when he was much higher than him. Then he has that subjugation, self-effacement, and yearning to koilet zayin to Rosh HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to absorb the teaching of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Was his neloma me'ein kol chai, which is hidden from the eye of any living thing, in zayin havona v'asog, in his understanding, grasping. Similarly, generally, by im is done nit nor der esek haTorah bepoil. Not only does he have the occupation of Torah actuality, the chavivus v'yoker haTorah, but also has the dearness and the preciousness of Torah. Baruch Hu b'Torah tchila, to make the bracha in Torah in the beginning. Wer der hepech von of the oretz. This brings the opposite from the land is lost. There it says Ameh of the oretz hashalei Baruch Hu b'Torah tchila. It was lost because but here you're making the bracha. We are meriting very soon to cover us up with the sukkah of peace in the binyan Beis Hamikdash, in the building of the Beis Hamikdash. Was a few state over there. It says Vayhi b'sholim sukkah, that it would with peace his sukkah, his surrounding, which was said about, was that gebuit werden durch Mashiach Tzidkenu, which will build to Mashiach Tzidkenu Meher V'Yimeinu Mamash, speedily in our days. This is Mesichas Simchas Beis HaShe'eva Tovshin Chav Dalet. There's also very many important orders over here that the Rebbe brings down, different orders, but it's a little bit beyond the scope of our learning over here. But the Rebbe explains a lot in Yonim Halacha and Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch with regards to the laws of Sukkot, with regard to the laws of Pesach, and the Rebbe explained here the different principles. So it's very important to go over the Sikha again and to go through all the Mara Mekoimis, and we'll leave that for another time.